You're listening to the Dibbly-Dobbly podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. First of all, Gabe, let's talk about Test cricket and the oldest format of the game, of course, Test cricket. Now, I know that the first series that you watched of cricket ever, and the first match you watched was a Test match between England and the West Indies.
Right.
And you fell in love with Test cricket from that moment on. What is it about Test cricket, Gabe, that made you get drawn to this format that all of us cricket lovers love to watch and still do to this day?
You know, I think that for me, what I love about Test cricket is that it's almost, well, it's a test of wills. It really, because one of the things I don't like about many sports is you're up against the clock. Okay. And especially if it's like a 1 day match, not a 1 day match, but just a 1 day match or a 4 or 5 hour match, you're up against the clock. But even in boxing, I used to box when I was younger. I can't tell you how many times I'm in there and I've coasted through 4 or 5 rounds and I'm just looking up at the clock. Like, one of the greatest of all time. And I hate saying that because, he's not my favorite person in the world, but Floyd Mayweather Jr., you'd see him in boxing matches, popping people, and he'd tie him up, look up at the clock, how many minutes do I got to go? You know what I mean? Like, you're not, you're just, abiding your time, so to speak. You know what I mean? And Test cricket's different. It's a war of attrition. It really is. And so you really got to go out there and earn that victory. And, I never understood the excitement of a draw, you know what I mean, until I saw one. And I was just, I mean, to this day, one of my favorite matches, again, it happened in the Ashes. We're talking about Australia and England. And it was the only match that Australia couldn't win. And you've got them throwing the gauntlet out there. I mean, Smudge is bowling. They threw Smudge out there to bowl. It was something about lighting, I guess, because they couldn't bowl the fast bowler or something to that effect. But you got Jimmy Anderson on one side and Stuart Broad on the other, who had been left off earlier in the series. And they're battling, and they did not let England get whitewashed. And even as a fan of Australia, I thought that was just so gutsy. And I think that that's what it is. Is for you to play Test, you've just got to have gumption. You know what I mean? Because you're going to go out there and you will be tested. Your soul will be tested. There's an old adage in boxing, right? Everybody can fight until they get hit. You know what I mean? Everybody can fight. You look good in the gym, but once you get hit, it's like, oh, well, everybody, yeah, of course, you look good in the nets. He's a net bowler. He looks good, or he looks good batting the cages. Until the other guy's throwing at you, until you've been out there for 4 or 5 days and you're exhausted. And there was the one, who was it? I think, was it Don Bradman? No. The Australian batsman that was absolutely dead, like just running between the wickets, lasted, and then they ended up taking
Dean Jones.
Dean Jones, yeah, I remember Nick and I did that. Had to go to the hospital and get hydrated after that because that's what it is. That's what it is that I love about Test, that you really have to lay it all out as an athlete, and it's not just oh, I'm gonna play the time game and then manipulate stats that way.
Yeah, that was a gutsy knock from Dean Jones. And well, back then it was called Madras, now called Chennai. For that tie Test in 1986, there's only been 2, and both of them were pretty special. Obviously, the other one was against your West Indies, Gabe, in Brisbane in 1960-61, which was a memorable match for everyone who remembers that game. It is a great format, and I fell in love with cricket by watching Test cricket on the TV, as most people in Australia did. You wake up early, and you watch a Test match. You listen to the famous commentators of Richie Benaud, Bill Lawry, Tony Greig, and Ian Chappell. Sadly, not the case anymore in Australia. But for me, someone who's in their 20s, I still feel like a little kid who gets up early, and I feel like that every summer. Watch the Test match, and we enjoy what is going to be a great Test match, hopefully over the next 5 days. But you say what you like about it, Gabe, but what do you dislike about it? There's always things that people like and dislike about it. What are the things you don't like about Test cricket that really annoy you, that you want changed or improved in the format?
Oh my gosh, what a! I mean, and it's funny because I got so much respect and love for you, bro. But first and foremost, the umpiring. It seems like it just gets worse and worse. It does. I'm sorry, it does. You see such bad calls, and whether it's, I mean, obviously in T20 you see some atrocious calls, but even Test you'll see some bad calls, and things just drives you crazy. It just drives you crazy. So I think that for me, and I mean that's with most sports. Now I get it; it's a tough job. It really, really is. But if you got the technology in order to fix it, then fix it. Get it right, and that's always the way I've looked at it. So to me, I think that's one of the things that annoys me. But then again, every format of cricket has that um, a challenge. I would say the next thing that kind of I don't not that I don't like about cricket, but I don't choose my words carefully. So I mean, I speak how I speak. It is what it is. Good luck. It's a boys' club, all right, and
Yeah.
you've got the gatekeepers where you've got Australia, the West Indies, England, and you've got so many other nations that are playing cricket. But like for instance, USA just had a pretty big win the other day against Scotland. We were talking about that before we came on. USA is not going to play the big boys, Australia or India or England, because they don't have a test team, right? And a lot. There's so many good nations and associate nations that don't have a test team, but because of the structure of cricket, those other nations don't have the funds, don't have the money. And I would just say the way it's allocated, where it's just basically revolves around the big three or four, and you know what I mean. Like I think it hurts the game to a certain extent because more people might get into it if more nations were able to afford, if the money was distributed more evenly, so that you could get a Oman or a no, USA is far away from it, but get those associate nations in there playing. I mean, why wouldn't they? Of course, they would. People from those places would tune in more if they got their test teams, if their nations had test teams.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's just about the structures domestically and the money,
Right,
basically. And it's like Ireland, Afghanistan, who've got test status now. They're not playing enough test matches as it
right.
is at the moment.
It it's expensive, man. It's expensive, and
It
then
is, and oh, sorry, go on. Yeah, we
no,
can.
no, 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 no. I said it's expensive, and then you also have to get those other big uh uh test, cricketing nations to want to travel there. You know what I mean? Because I know obviously with Afghanistan, we know the situation, but Ireland and other places, does the Indian want to travel to Ireland? You know what I mean? Can you? Who was it that canceled the test match? Remember Australia had to cancel a test match,
South
and
Africa, South Africa.
oh, okay, yeah, and people are livid, man. You know what I mean? Because there's just so much money. So behind it and to throw one of these series on. And I think that if you know Test is to survive, they've got to introduce and continue to open up the world of cricket to other nations. So they just got to make it easier for other nations to not just have their test teams, but to hold these test matches. They've got to, maybe they're mandated. All right, in college football, for instance, and this is an American sport, but even if you're a big powerhouse school, you're mandated to have to play certain games in conference and certain games out of conference so that you may go to a smaller area or a smaller school, but it grows the game. It grows, Australia will bring their fandom to a Oman, to a USA, to one of those smaller nations. So I think that honestly, that would probably be the next I would say the next step I'd like to see Test cricket to take. Sadly, I don't see it happening. But if you ask me what bothers me, the fact that just the little guys like us, USA, just are kind
Yeah,
of kept out of Test.
yeah,
And
it
I see
is.
my peoples in the chat. What's going on there, Jihan? What's going on? The direct hit. What's going on, peoples? Much love. Thanks for joining. Yes, Rip Dean Jones. Rip Dean Jones.
Yes. Yeah, Dean Jones. Yeah, one of a kind cricketer. Had a short Test career. Only played 50 odd tests for Australia, but yeah, he was a great player. sadly missed by all. As you were saying, Gabe, obviously, as we talk about Test cricket here, and if you've got any questions, everyone, we would like to have that in the chat. If you can provide some questions, if you want me and Gabe to answer your questions, we're more than happy to in this live stream today, this live discussion. It's something that Ravi Shastri said, Gabe, that he wanted to take away teams from Test cricket in terms of the competitiveness and not the one-sided nature of it. Like, for example, with Australia versus Zimbabwe, it's a one-sided match. And he said probably have 6 Test teams and take away the others and probably, do that. I didn't agree with what he said there because you're not really growing or developing Test cricket in that way. Because you've got 12 Test playing nations, you've given Afghanistan Islands Test status. Why take it away from them because they're not being competitive? The only way they're going to get better is by playing the top-ranked nations. You are going to have some games where you're going to lose badly, but you'll learn a lot from it. So what are your thoughts on that, Gabe? Should we do that or stay away from what he suggested?
If we did that, would we have a powerhouse India today? I mean, go back and put that same mentality to India, who's one of the dominant nations today. That was not always the case, right? I remember watching the film '83 with Nick, and there's the one scene where Kapil Dev goes in, and I know that was ODI different standard, but still he goes in and he's like, "What are you here? We're here to win the World Cup." Like, you're here to win the World Cup? Like, they looked at it like shocked, like, yeah, because it was just one of those things that was just unheard of. Or even go back further. I know somebody in the comment later was talking about how abysmal my West Indies attack was. You're absolutely right, West Indies. But go back 20 years and say that. You know what I mean? Go back to the Four Horsemen. You know what I mean? Like, it goes through cycles. It goes through cycles. And you have a situation where right now you've got a few dominant teams or whatever, but everything goes in cycles. And the only way other nations will get better is, to your point, playing up to competition. If you don't get to play up to competition, then you never have to push yourself. I mean, I would say it's the same thing where, even in domestic sports here, for instance, in America, Golden State Warriors were a joke. I'm not sure if you follow the NBA. Golden State Warriors turned into a dynasty. They won like 4 championships in 5 years. So just because teams are bad now doesn't mean they're always going to be bad. I mean, if they're always going to be, India was bad. Are they bad now? You know what I mean? Like, just saying. So you've got to give those nations an opportunity to grow. And to your point, the only way they're going to get better is by playing, better competition. If you kind of keep them in the bubble. And I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier with that comment. It's like there's the boys club and, the top nations and then everybody else. And then it's like, you guys don't matter. That don't make any sense. You know what I mean? That you're really hurting your viewership and you're hurting potential revenue streams by doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, you mentioned that boys' club, the big 3, Australia, India, England, and they're probably not doing as much as they should in world cricket at the moment, like helping out, and that it's a big problem. What do you think of the World Test Championship, Gabe? It was brought in to add context and relevance to Test cricket, and it's been great, I think. What do you reckon? Has it done Test cricket a good thing to have it?
It's like everything else, right? It fixes one problem but creates another. So one of the things I love about Test is that, again, it's a true test of wills, so to speak. God, Nick would love it because I'm not, no pun intended, but there it goes. But think about it. In tests, for the most part, even if it's a short series, you're going to play 2 tests, right? We got, of course, Australia going to be playing my West Indies later on. But for the most part, you at least got a 3 tests. And the Test World Championship was just 1 test match. So, it kind of like, while it was still tests and, you played over, 3, 4 days, 5 days, whatever, anybody can win 1 test match. Things could break your way. Weather could break your way, Again, win the series. Win the series. That's a different animal. And I think that in order to really give it the authenticity of Test, it's got to be at least 3 matches. It does. And I know it's going to take time to play. So what? So fit it in the schedule. So what? Fit it in the schedule. But having it just it's basically a ODI, right? A 1 day test match, basically. And I get it that it's, you're going to play over a few days, but it shouldn't be just one test match. It should be a test series because that's what you put the weight on. We don't just play one test match unless everything else was played that way, but we don't, right?
Yeah.
We play series. So, I mean, that's my opinion. With that being said, I think that it gives teams something to play for. It makes these meaningless, quote unquote, mundane matches that sometimes you're like, oh, really? We got to go over there. It makes it matter. It'll make an Australia say, okay, yeah, I better not cancel that tour to whoever play
Yeah,
there
yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
you need those points. So it makes every series matter. And I think it's going to ensure that the majority of test matches do get played and that teams just don't end up canceling because, yeah, what's the penalty? Doesn't fit into the schedule. Maybe they got some injured players, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, absolutely. And the only thing I will say with it is that it doesn't have all 12 teams. It only has 9, and you don't play everyone in one cycle, home and away. So you do
Right,
miss out on playing other teams. It's got a lot of teething problems there, but it's
right,
doing great stuff for test cricket, and it's adding those context and relevance which is needed. And teams have something to play for. And with the final, yes, it would be nice if it was like a playoff sort of situation, like sort of like in the NBA or something like that. They do playoffs, like final series or whatever.
right.
Yeah, but they've decided the ICC, it's a one-off test, neutral venue, whoever performs well over the 5 days. In the case of the last final, which we have 6 because it rained in Southampton, not
Right, right, right.
surprising in England, always rains. It even bucketed down against England and South Africa in this test
Right,
match that just concluded recently.
right.
But yeah, it's something that the ICC may need to look at in future cycles. We got some questions. Hi, everyone. Hope you enjoyed our cricket discussion with Gabe from Cricket for Americans and all things Test cricket. Let us know in the comments your thoughts about Test cricket from part 1. We would love to hear what you have to say.